Hello, my friends, visionaries, seekers of more. Welcome to Let's Talk. I am Shay Marville. This isn't just a podcast, it's a journey. Do you ever feel that persistent tug, yelling, whispering, crying? There's more for you. There's more in you. Are you ready to dive deep, challenge your beliefs, evolve your perspectives? Together, we'll explore the depths of self-discovery, unlocking talents, passions, and potentials, one conversation at a time. Sometimes I will remind you to unleash your greatness. Sometimes we'll have a guest modeling their greatness. Sometimes we'll meditate. So sit back, open your mind, embark on this journey to unleash what? You. Let's begin.
Oh my gosh, my friends, I am so excited because this afternoon I have a really cool treat. Someone who's brave and dynamic and truthful and vivacious. Kara Alloway, welcome to Let's Talk. I can't wait to hear about what's going on with Toronto Housewives and your new book. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Now listen, I realized that you and I grew up not that far away from each other. You grew up in Leaside. I grew up in Toronto, correct?
Yes, yeah. So Toronto, for the most part, we moved, so I was sort of in central Leaside, like is central Toronto. And then I moved a little bit uptown when I was around 8. So yeah, I didn't realize that.
Me too. So it's so very cool.
Where'd you go to school?
Well, I went to Thorncliffe Park Public School. Then I went.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I know, right? And then I moved to Scarborough and I went to Lamoureux Collegiate and then I went to Glendon College.
Okay, literally Glendon College, the campus at Lawrence and Bay. Sorry, I don't want to be boring here, but literally that's in my 6-block radius. That's where I grew up and where I am now.
Exactly. Okay, so one more coincidence is that I think one of your degrees, one of my degrees are the same. You did literature and dramatic arts.
Yes. That's cool. I love that.
So very cool. Now, I am really curious about how you decided to even do the Housewives, like get into the Housewives franchise. Like, number one, it is such a mad, like crazy, wild ride. How did you make the decision to participate?
Well, it was actually I fell into it by accident, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I had always wanted to produce I hadn't always wanted to, but I had an idea to produce a reality television show. So I had no idea what I was doing. I just had this idea in my head. So I found a production company and I pitched it to them. And they said, okay, we'll buy the rights to this. But at the time they were doing Vancouver Housewives. Right. And they said, maybe you're going to do Toronto Housewives, if we do Toronto Housewives. And I said, I don't know, but, let me know, keep me in mind, whatever, maybe I will. I don't know. You don't want to burn any bridges. So the rights to my show expired with them, but I heard back from them again and they said, we're going to do a show. Originally, it was going to be Real Housewives of Muskoka, which, as you know, is north of the city. Yes, but then they decided, no, they said, no, it's going to be Toronto Housewives. So I said, well, I'm not sure that that's for me, but let me help you cast it, because I did, they had their feelers out in the city and they were, as you do when you cast a show, you ask around, does anyone know anyone? Because casting is really tricky. And, recently someone said, but none of the top tier people of New York are in New York Housewives. And I sort of said, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Aaron Lauder isn't doing New York Housewives. You want that next tier down, which sounds like, hey, I'm not A-list. I'm not even B-list, okay? I'm C-list. But you want that next tier down. So, I was introducing them to people and they were saying, no, either the TVQ wasn't there or the individuals found out what was involved really and said, no, not for me, thank you, but no. So they came back to me and said, what about you? And I sort of thought, oh. So I went to my husband and he said, well, if this is something you would like to embark on, you will have the full support of myself and the boys, but we will not be participating.
Right.
So I sort of, I didn't know what to do, and I wanted him to be in it with me. He's a lawyer.
So he kind of knows.
So you understand.
Just to be cautious, right?
He didn't, and he's a very private person. He just said, it's not for me. And I have one son who is an actor, my youngest son. He's not anymore, but he did a lot of voice and commercial work. And he even said, I'm in the union, Mom, but I'm not doing your show. I was like, okay, I get it. So I thought long and hard about it. And then I decided, you know what? I'm the kind of person, I like adventure. I like trying new food. I like visiting places that, are off the grid. I like the path not taken. So I thought, I had friends that had done the Beverly Hills franchise.
Yes.
I saw, the pluses and the minus. And I said, you know what?
Yes.
Why not? Why not try something once? And also I thought, look, if I want to do my show, production was selling it to me like, oh, this could be a sizzle and your show could be a spinoff. And I can remember thinking, but wait, I want to produce the show. I don't want to be in it. But then I thought, you know what? You never know what doors this would open. And I'm so happy that I did. People say, do you have regrets? Yeah. Not at all. I am so happy that I did because, it's a windy path, but one led to the next. I ended up, after the show finished, getting an agent to represent me as a producer in Los Angeles. I was able to take my show to film companies that I would never have been exposed to before. And it was great because when my agent and I walked into these meetings with these film companies, they'd say, wait a second, you were a participant on Housewives? Oh my goodness. Because they thought that was really interesting that someone who had participated would want to be on the other side of the camera, but also a leg up because I knew how to speak to the participants so they could understand and trust me. Not with a sense of falsehood, but just, look, I get it. I understand the anxiety. I'm going to look after you.
Were you not afraid of the level of just attention and focus on your life, and just the world, people knowing stuff about you? Were you you didn't feel uncomfortable about that?
In all honesty, if I tell you the truth, I never contemplate. Where were you when I was making this decision? Where were you saying, have you thought this out, young lady? Honestly and truthfully, I did not contemplate that. Because I had grown up as a child actress, I really saw it as, taking on another role. I had no sense of what the social media implications would be, of the trolls, of any of that. I had not contemplated it. And again, how foolish of me, because I did have a friend who was involved, in the other franchise. And I knew other individuals that were involved in other reality shows, but I just never considered that really. And I hadn't really heard them struggle with that either. So that was never on my radar, but it should have been. And here's the thing. You do a psychological analysis after you've signed the participant agreement, before the show starts filming, you do a psychological analysis, and it's given by
me. That surprises me.
Interestingly enough, I talked to Brandy Glanville and she said for Beverly Hills, they didn't do that. And I was like, oh, really? So we did it here, and it's given by a firm that does psychological assessments for corporations. So, it's explained to you, this is just to make sure you can withstand the social media and the attacks and the pressure and all of that. But let me explain to you, this psychological assessment was like a 2.5 hour ordeal. This was not to make sure I could withstand the attacks. This was called, what are your phobias? What are your triggers? What are your, what sets you off and whatnot? And, I went into it probably eyes wide shut, but thinking it was, I'm going to be as honest as possible in this, and, spilled out, I don't like big spiders. I don't like highway driving. Sometimes I get scared of large dogs, just giving them all my, here you go. So that was interesting. That was an interesting part. And what's funny is after the show wrapped, you never get to see your psychological assessment. And after the show wrapped, I contacted the firm that had done it. And I said, hi, could I please have a copy of my psychological assessment? And they, sure. So they sent it to me, and it's interesting because the very first line, aside from spelling out all of my phobias and fears, the very first line said, Kara Alloway has a very high emotional intelligence. And I had the privilege of sitting in on a casting session with the gentleman that did The Real World and many other shows, Jonathan Boonham. And I sat in on a casting session with him. And he said, when you're looking for a villain, what you want is someone who has very high emotional intelligence. So when I read that, I went, Oh, okay. Now a lot more makes sense.
Well, see, and that gets to my very next question, which is, did you know going in that you were going to be cast as the villain, as the woman who would like, kind of be an instigator or like push back or, create a kind of drama? Did you anticipate that?
I
Or did it
did,
just evolve?
it evolved. I did not anticipate it at all. I know my characteristics, and I know that I would be earmarked as a very independent thinker.
Right.
And I do tend to be very forthright. I will call them as I see them, but with a gentle voice at that. And I understand when there are issues, everybody takes different time to process issues and whatnot. But I am very much put the cards on the table and let's talk about it. I'm not a carpet sweeper. As I've said, I drive my husband and my kids crazy because I am always saying, we need to air everything out here. We need to talk about it. Sometimes they're like, can we not, please? I'm like, no, we can't have anything, under the carpet. Let's get it all out. So to that end, no. Also, I did not know who the other participants were going to be prior to filming. So I knew who they weren't because I knew they weren't any of my girlfriends because I had recommended a lot of my girlfriends for the show and I knew that they weren't doing the show. So I can remember thinking, well, if they're not, who is? Because, not that I know everybody in the city, but I sort of I feel like I've exhausted my list of people I know. There was one participant in the show who was an acquaintance through another woman. So yes. I knew she was doing it because I actually cast her on the show. I actually went to the producers. They said, we still need one more. And I said, okay, I know someone. She's not a classic housewife, but I think that she has a big personality because I am a kick-ass casting director when it comes to reality television. Let me tell you something. I know TVQ. And I said, she's not standard, but I think that she has the kind of personality she would be good on TV.
Wow. And I wonder though, I know you knew who you were prior to starting the show. Do you think the show changed you or kind of groomed you into something else?
I would say definitely. I learned a ton from the show. Before the show, I identified as a pleaser. So I said, I have a pleaser personality. And I can remember always thinking, I'm a pleaser. Sorry, I'm a pleaser. Sorry. And I never realized until the show that having a pleaser mentality is closely tied up in vanity. There's a lot of vanity involved there because sure, you want everyone to be happy, but you want everyone to like you. So yes. If you peel back the layers of that, why do you want everyone to like you? Why is that so important? Why are you not just saying, this is who I am, like me or not? But so I grew out of my pleasing mentality very quickly through the show. I also learned, did the show groom me and change me? Absolutely. I learned a lot. I learned, like, Kara, you don't have to die on every hill. Give it up. Why do you have to take everything so seriously? I learned a lot about interacting with, and that's why actually my book takes place on a reality television show. I learned a ton about female relationships. I learned a ton about women interacting with women and the dynamics of that and how it works. I had a million questions after the show. Why would this happen? Why would this happen? And then I read this great book by Dr. Phyllis Chesler, a nonfiction book called, have you heard of it? Woman's Inhumanity to Woman.
Yes.
Amazing. Should be required reading for every 16-year-old girl. Really and truly.
Wow.
Reveals so much about how women interact with women, informed so many of the characters for my book, Most Hated. Just really the psychology, the sociological reasons as to why we do some of the things we do in friend groups, in interpersonal relationships with women. Just really, really interesting stuff. So did I learn and grow from the show? 100-fold. That's another reason why I'm so thankful that I did it.
I want to know all about the book, but let me ask you this. Do you think that the franchise is one that represents women in a way that, obviously I'm not talking about reality because, obviously this is a very kind of elite group of women, but do you think it represents women in a way that elevates where women are right now and what women could become?
Ooh, that's a good question. That is a good question.
I know,
and it varies from franchise to franchise, because I have to tell you that my franchise was produced by, the production company will sort of, always have their seal on the franchise and the product they deliver. So if you look at something that someone like Alex Baskin, 32 Flavors, Truly Original, Shed Media, I'm talking Salt Lake City, New York, Beverly Hills, Orange County. If I look at those ones, yes, absolutely. What I think it does, that is what I love about the Housewives franchise, is it does something that's twofold, that is a win in reality television. It delivers something that is both aspirational and relatable. And the analogy I like to use for that is, look at the Kardashians. It's incredibly relatable. Everybody fights with their sibling. It's aspirational, not necessarily while you're driving your Ferrari or your Lamborghini, but it's both of those things, which I think is why it makes reality television art. So do I think that these franchises elevate women? Oh, it absolutely, the definition of art, does it satisfy? Does it soothe? 100%. People come home from their messy lives, sit down, and are able to delve into these other lives that they can relate to, but that are also somewhat, aspirational or somewhat messier than theirs. I think a lot of the behavior is almost like when people judge. I heard it said that it's almost like judging is like a confession of what you'd like to do. And I went, isn't that the truth? When I sit there and I see someone behaving badly on one of these shows, if I'm honest with myself, there's times I've wanted to throw a drink at someone. I'm not going to do that. But, if I'm honest with myself, and that makes it so easy to judge, oh, you shouldn't have done that because I don't do that. So why are you doing that? So it's interesting.
It's a very provocative statement that reality TV is art. And I think you're right. I think it is art. And I think that's one of the beauties of art, is that art is a lot of things to a lot of different people, right? But now I wonder, though, when you're on the show, is it you as an actor, or is it you as...
It's a little bit of both.
Right,
so
okay.
that's a good question. The best I could, you studied drama. The best thing I could compare it to would be doing an improvisation. So the scene is set up. Okay, the producer set up the scene. Kara, today you are going to have a committee meeting, and Che is going to be at your committee meeting. You'll be introducing her to the rest of the committee. By the end of the meeting, she will accept a position on the committee. So you and I go to where we're going to film this, and you and I are kept apart. So I see you. Hey, how are you? I make eye contact with you.
Right.
Across the room. We're getting mic'd up a little bit like a boxing match, because you're at the other side and I'm over here getting mic'd up, very much aware that you're wearing a mic. Although sometimes, even though I said I would never forget I was wearing a mic, there would be times when I'd go, to say something, and then I'd be like, I'm mic'd, I forgot. Or someone would come over to talk to me and I'd be going, no, honey, I'm wearing a mic. You don't want to say that. You never knew who's listening. But anyway, so we're kept apart. We're mic'd up. The adrenaline is rushing. The scene is set up. We know what we have to do. Okay, let's go. So we go. So I'm Kara there and you're Che there, but you're reacting to what I'm saying. You're keenly aware that you're being filmed. So, if you're brushing your teeth by yourself, how is that different if you're brushing your teeth with two cameramen wearing a mic and a boom? You're going to be very different. So you're going to be, there's a greater awareness, I feel, too. There's a sense of self-protection because you're, also, and then just to put that little cherry on the top of the sundae, maybe before we start the scene, a producer is, looking in her moleskin and looks up and says, okay, and you know what? Do not even worry about what happened in that scene that Che shot with Suzanne yesterday. Don't even think about that. And you're going, wait, what? What scene did they shoot? What did I miss out? Because don't forget, as long as I'm shooting my scenes and telling my story, you're shooting your scenes, telling your story. So there's a lot going on. So it's like, what?
And when did you decide that you needed to write about, like that you felt inspired enough to start like collecting stories and writing this new story?
So I always wanted to write about females and female relationships. I grew up in a family that was mostly girls, cousins, mostly girls, went to a private girls' school, love women. All my friends are girls, surrounded by women. Strangely enough, I have all boys actually in my family. But Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to write about female relationships, but I wasn't sure what that backdrop was going to be. And I thought, maybe it's going to be a private girls' school or a university. I'm not sure. Then after the first season that I did this, 100%, I knew this is the perfect backdrop. And the book is more about the interaction of the females and less about the reality television. I drop a couple little, hey, this goes on and this goes on, which keeps it interesting and light, because it is not a heavy book. It's a light, fun book. Mm-hmm. But definitely it's about women interacting with women. And there's a lot of what Dr. Chesler in her book refers to as internalized, I think she calls it misplaced female misogyny, which is, that idea that it starts in the playground at 8 years old. And we tend to be very tribal. And the independent thinkers, the ones that don't necessarily agree with the top tier of the tribe, sometimes they can be ostracized. And It's not the little boys that are ostracizing the independent thinking girls. It's the other girls, which is why I say we have to shake this up and change this around. So how do girls retaliate? Well, little boys, if someone's doing something you don't like, they might put you in a headlock or they might tussle you around. And I'm not saying that girls should have a physical aggression towards other girls, but what are girls trained to do? Number one, do not act right away on your hurt. Hold your hurt inside and take it away with you. Number two, so you've got to think, that's building and bubbling. Number two, how is the independent thinker punished? Gossip, shunning, slandering. And this starts in the playground at age 8. Can you imagine? As we get older, it only gets worse. It only grows.
So if you are identifying these elements of becoming a woman, of growing into a woman, of women friendships, why do you feel like now, produce or creating this book that is inspired by this? Why is that so important? Like, what is it that you're going to change or you want to change because of this book? Or inspire?
Well, thank you for asking.
Maybe not.
That's a good question.
But maybe inspire.
Yeah, change is sort of a dream, right?
Change is huge.
Change takes a long time too. Yeah. But I would say this. Somebody asked me, if there was one thing you could start in motion, what would it be? I would love to say this would start a movement to eradicate gossip, which, we've eliminated toxic words from our vocabulary. We, as a society, have evolved. We have done a lot. I would love to see that eliminated. And again, Dr. Chesler talks on this and talks about how gossip is so toxic. In some cultures, with the honor killings, it's comes back to a case of gossip. It comes back to, divorce comes from gossip. So if there was a way we could make it that young girls, when they were around and heard gossip, or anybody for that matter, not just young girls. I mean, I do consider myself a feminist. It sounds like people say like, be careful, Kara, this is friendly fire. We got to fight the outside, but we have to change from the inside, right? Yeah, we have to really start the change there.
Right. But then I think there's so many different ways to be feminist, right? Because we all have different views and lenses into the world. So I think it's great that you are bringing forward something that you feel compelled and convicted to talk about. And I think the difficulty around the concept of gossip is that, we also live in this third room, all of us, which is social media. And there's all this, and it was never regulated. Like now we're talking about regulating AI but we never regulated social media. So it's just been able to grow like a wildfire. And part of what kind of spurs it and lets it spin out of control is gossip, right? And how we just seem to be trained on thinking that it's appropriate, it's okay. It's not hurting anyone because it's not in someone's face. But it is, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, some of the things that people wrote and said to me, and what would floor me is I would think, this is not just someone off the cuff yelling at their television or yelling at their computer screen. This is someone who had to stop, find me on social media, write this out, and send it to me, knowing that I, as an individual, as a person who, I bleed like everybody else, would read this and ingest it. And it was just, I would sit there and say like, wow. Now, what did I learn? A lot of times things that set people off are things that they are particularly sensitive about, right? So,
Yes.
that would be a particular hurt of someone, or particularly sensitive to someone. And also, another thing that I learned so much from this experience, which I already knew, but it was just exaggerated for me and brought home for me, is that everybody has a story. And I said that to someone the other day. I said, I will be sitting in traffic, and my kids joke, I'm like the grandma driver. I'm not a fast driver at all. I have a car that, like, when you start it, it goes, and then here comes Kara, like driving the hot dog cart is passing me on the street. Okay. So sometimes people will by me. And someone did that the other day. And my first instinct was, and they were like, turned around and looked out the window behind me. And I just stopped and took a breath. And I went, what is happening in his life today? What's going on with him? Is he having trouble paying his rent? Or did he just have a huge fight with his wife? What? Yeah. So, hurt people. And when there is someone that is particularly mean or aggressive or angry, maybe they're hurting. And I need to look no further than myself. I mean, if I'm hurting, I'm a little snippy with the kids. I'm a little snippy with my husband. I'm a little snippy with my mom. I've got into the car with her before, and she's been like, oh, hello. And hi, mom. Bad day.
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, everything, we have to be reflective of ourselves and our motivations and, like our ongoing evolving story. Right. And I wonder, now that you've written the book, now that you've been part of this franchise, I know you have other dreams, like how you kind of like are reinventing yourself, right? With everything that's been happening over the last 5 years. So like, what is next? Where do you take the book? Where are you going to take your producing and making of art?
That's a great question. I don't know. I asked myself that a lot. So I've started work on another book, which is a prequel, but I don't think that I'd like it to stop there. Would I love to see this book in a limited series or a movie? 100%. Absolutely, I would. I mean, of course, I think, it would lend itself so well to that medium. Would I like to be involved in that? Yes, definitely. Obviously. Do I love producing reality television? Yes, because at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller. And I love telling stories. And I say to people, after you've read the book, my favorite thing in the world is to read reviews. And the funny thing is, I thought somebody gave me 1 star and said, I couldn't finish this book. It was my first bad review. And I went, wow, okay. And I was really curious. So I read her review, and she said, I have no interest in reality television. I didn't like the characters, and I just put it down and I couldn't finish it. And it's funny because you do have to have tough skin in this, if you want to be a writer. But fortunately, my alligator skin is pretty thick from Housewives, so I'm okay with that. But it was interesting to me because I thought, I'm okay with that. There have been books that I've read, and books are such a personal thing. I mean, you're reading someone else's story and vision, and I've put them on my shelf, and then I've gone back and revisited them years later, and I'm talking like 4 years later, and picked them up and devoured them and said, oh, I just wasn't in the right space in my life for that book or for that story at that time. And in discussions with my boys, they've done the same thing. They said, no, we tried to read this and we just weren't there. And then they went back and read it. Yeah, so I think that's interesting.
It sort of books represent different times of our lives and different phases of our growth, right? And what we're willing to be open to. I'm just curious about you as an actor and as a writer, trying to create in a city like Toronto as well. I mean, because Toronto's it's a tough city for art, like art of any kind, and TV and media and books included in that.
I agree. And that's too bad, right? That really stinks about our city. We are the 3rd largest city in North America, and that needs to change. That needs to improve because look, we have a great art scene thriving, but I think it could be better. I think our television, I think our theater, I think all of that could be more. Not that it could be better. I think it could be expanded. I think it could be more. Yes. Why LA and New York? Why not Toronto? Why not?
Toronto is one of the most magnificent cities in the world. And I think one of the things that I find interesting about Toronto, and I would be interested in knowing what you think about this, is that it is such a dynamically diverse place. Like everyone, every kind of person, I think, lives in this part of the world, in this city. And I think it's really interesting to see, all the different levels and classes and how people are interacting with each other and, creating lives with each other. And they're just, there are things that you see in Toronto that you don't see in any other place in terms of people interacting with each other and having friendships, with one another. Like, I mean, you and I, we've not met in person, but we didn't grow up very far away from one another. We lived in very much the same kind of culture in many ways. And I think, sometimes, based on race or ethnicity or language, there's this assumption that people they can't have, connected lives. And that's not, I don't think that's true in Toronto.
Oh, at all. No, you're absolutely right for that. At all. Toronto is so good about that. And you're right when you say it's not just a race thing, it's also a class thing.
Yes.
You can interact. I've been in some groups and some studies and whatnot with people of, a wide, diverse income level, for lack of a better word. And I love the way we all get along, and I love the way we're able to push that aside. And I do think that is also very much a Canadian thing. I mean, you must have experienced, if you're ever traveling and you run into someone who's from Canada, they're so happy to connect. Oh, you're from Canada. They're just so happy to connect and whatnot, which is great. But yeah, I would like to see our theater scene a little bit more. I'd like to see our television and movie scene a little bit more. But at the end of the day, look at our population compared to America. I mean, we're hippity hopping along. We're just so much smaller.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're so influenced by American television and movies and reality television. And I think the franchise that you're part of is obviously influenced by the American point of view, right? And even though there's different points of view within the franchise, there's a certain mentality that the franchise is trying to produce. Do you feel like there's something that's really unique about Toronto and being Canadian that, makes what you all are doing different?
That's a good question. Yes. Do I feel that was tapped into for my franchise? No. So, when you say what's next for you, in a dream world, imagine if someone like an Alex Baskin or a Truly Original or Shed Media who did Dubai, I think they did Real Housewives of Dubai. Imagine if they came here and put their little magic wand on Toronto Housewives. I would love
together
that. I would love to see that, though. I would like to see what it would look like under the direction, under the care of one of those production companies, because I think it would be absolutely off the charts, insane dynamic, and I think it would be great. I'll sign up to help produce it.
Okay, so now I know you sort of skirted around the idea that your book would become its own show or series, but let's just say that's what's going to happen. It's going to happen. What would you change now that you've written the book and you're one of the iterations of it will be a show? How would you tell the story differently?
That is a good question.
Or would you?
I don't know that I would tell the story differently, but I think I would tell more of the story. So in a book, Margaret Atwood, I went to this Hot Docs interview with her where she was launching her Old Babes in the Woods book, which is a collection of short stories.
I saw the interview.
So good. Oh, so good. So what she said in that interview was, if you were to put everything you wanted to in a book, it would be huge and go on forever, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe not everything that I want to put in it, but there was definitely things that had to be edited out of my book for lengthwise. I remember when I first was taking it around, people were like, this is a long book. And I thought, well, you need the backstories here and you need this and this. So I would put more of the backstories into a show, more of not necessarily the prequel that I'm writing, but just give a little bit more into who the characters, where they come from, where the characters come from and their lives before the show, which of course I do touch on in the book, but not to the extent that I would want to.
Do you think that you wrote about friendships, women's friendships, because friendships change people's health and their lives? Do you think?
Absolutely.
Like, I mean,
friendships are key. You and I touched on this a little bit before we started.
Yes.
About your network is your net worth, was what you said, and great. I'm stealing that. Thank you very much.
I didn't come up with it. But
it's good though. It's good because it's so true. And I have a girlfriend who said to me what her mom said to her. She passed on to me, which was, love your family, love your husband, treasure your girlfriends, because you will get old and you will need your girlfriends. And I have seen some women who are widows who have lost their husbands, and, ouch, ache for them terribly. But am so thankful that they have myself and others as girlfriends, because really your network in your friendships and your female friendships is so crucial, which I think maybe is why I'm, doing this crusade of let's fix it, starting with the playground and the 8-year-olds. Let's take some of this garbage stuff out of it, because it is so precious. It is so important, and we need to preserve it. We really do.
And we need each other to build strong communities. But to your point, what you said, it makes me think about my mom who passed away about 2 years ago, very suddenly. And my mom was like a very effective, successful friendship maker. So she had friends from the time she was a little girl. Like, she was making friends till the very end of her life. And what you just reminded me of is, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but many of her friends who are in their 80s, some, 70s, 90s, many of them are still living. And when she passed away, they continued to check in on us. I talked to one of her friends, like her neighbor, just the day before yesterday. And she said, "Oh, I'm just calling to see how you're doing, Shay." She's 84. So I'm just calling to see how you're doing. And so I think like friendship is also like, there's this great inheritance that we get from friends in terms of love and connection and, just community.
I love that. Oh, I really love that. That's great. That's such a nice story to share. Thank you.
I just
so beautiful.
Because I think it relates to what you're talking about when you talk about your conviction around women having strong friendships and not hurting one another through gossip and melee and bullying. It's not just we don't want to do that because it hurts people, but because the other side is that you can raise a whole community based on friendship.
Exactly. Very well put. That's so true. And women, we are, men are okay with these mid-level relationships. They don't really get tight and whatnot. Women, come on, we are very definitely relational beings, right? Yes. We want the deep relationships. And I think that's why the world, especially right now, if you look at, what's going on in the world is so fascinated with female relationships. Look at how we tune in to see what's happening with Kate and Meghan. Look at how the world basically stopped about Selena Gomez and Hailey Bieber. Everybody had an opinion about that. Look at how everybody, if you look at reality television, this whole Vanderpump Rules, the girls on that show are the dialogue of that show. People are fascinated by watching women because we are relational beings. I mean, if you want to go back in time, when Mary found out she was pregnant, where did she head? She took a cab right over to her cousin's house. Okay. She was like, "Let me get over there and tell her." We're relational. We come by it naturally.
Well, listen, I am looking forward to building a relationship with you, and I am excited about finishing your book because I haven't, and I'm excited about you coming back on to talk about it, because I think it would be good to like maybe even do a little focus group about our female relationships. I don't know, do something interesting.
I would love that.
And I just think we should all support each other because that's what makes for a more interesting life. That makes for, more wealth in terms of love and joy and money. And we shouldn't be afraid to talk about money.
No, not at all. It's funny because women, we're also raised, traditionally, we have been raised in a very competitive mindset. And this is also another aspect that Phyllis Chesler gets into. It's not the idea that a win for one is a win for the team, that you can win and I can win and we can all win. Traditionally, it's been there is one beauty queen. There is one person who gets the role. We have always excelled at those kind of sports like gymnastics and whatnot. Yes, it is a team event, but pretty much, it's a competitive one against one. Whereas we have driven the men into the team sports. I'm so happy to see women's hockey, women's basketball, all of the women's group sports, women's rugby, all of that taking off and doing so well and gaining such popularity. That's what we need to promote more, is that mentality. You can win, I can win. And when you win, it's also a win for me. So I can share in your win. It doesn't mean that we're competing against each other.
No, I think we've got competition wrong. I mean, I think we're still, going with this idea that it's survival of the fittest, and it's really survival of whoever cooperates together. I think there's lots of news to share about making a living and how to grow and, professionally and make money. And I think we should not be afraid to talk about making money. I think we should be able to share ideas and tell stories. And maybe come back on and we talk about money. Let's just talk about money.
Let's talk about money. I'll wear green.
Yeah, me too. Listen,
or red. Red's also the color of money.
That's right. And green is like a chakra color. So, we'll get into colors later. Listen, thank you so very much. It's such a pleasure to connect with you. And I wish you just tremendous success with all that you're doing and this book and all that is to come.
Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed this. It was so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And so we wrap up another episode of Let's Talk. Remember, my friends, visionaries, seekers, self-discovery is your birthright. Each day, another step on this journey. Don't wait for the world to see the greatness in you. Recognize it in yourself. Embrace it and share it. And if today's conversation resonated with you and you're yearning for more, I invite you to explore The Marvel Way, a roadmap to personal growth at www.coachshaymarville.com and at www.shaymarvilleletstalk.com and at Shay Marville at Instagram. Listen, I'll find you, you find me. We inspire, uplift, and unleash our potential together. And until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep unleashing the truth of who you are. Bye for now.